Entry 2. The Inner Sanctum. The entrance to the sanctum, so Easy had told me, is through a hedge maze. Once through the maze there is, cut into a hillside, an opening of stone, with statues collected to greet one just within the entrance. Homunculi all by my own assessment. A cadre of granite guard ready to mobilise at a moment's notice. Bearing the key that Easy had given me all those long years ago, the guard stayed still as the statues they are. And after passing through the maze and those homunculi, I entered a grand foyer with marble stone and gold accents, devoid of furniture. In the middle of this foyer floated a granite sphere, as tall as a man. My days have taught me that caution and recklessness are required in a flowing, asymmetric measure to live the life I have. But when the stone cracked at the centre and blinked open a massive eye, casting its baleful gaze upon me, I wondered then at my impetuous side, for I was looking into the disembodied eye of a great dragon, and it was looking straight back at me, its intent seemingly malicious. Then, just as suddenly as it had opened, it blinked closed, perhaps divining my intentions as being of noble mark, and I passed without being immolated by whatever fires such strange security might summon. Next I entered a garden filled with fountains, greenery, and angelic set pieces, a place to commune and contemplate in idyllic surroundings. It was here that I encountered the first residents of the sanctum, and they greeted me with open arms and much delight. It was an emotional arrival, joyful and yet melancholy, and one in all honesty I did not expect, and for which I will be eternally grateful. These wonderful folk were all magi, and of differing orders, at leisure here in the garden of the sanctum, without animosity towards one or other. They directed me onwards, through the inner garden, to pass along a corridor off which many doors led. As I walked, I passed by branching passages and many archways opening into common rooms, a wonderful kitchen, workshops, and other places of rest and repose. I could smell the familiar odour of old texts, books, parchments, and vellum scrolls, and following my curiosity, I came across a great library whose shelves extended into a distance made hazy by the light of high windows, and I realized there must be a huge wealth of knowledge contained within. Finally, I came to a massive set of double doors crafted from polished timber, studded with heavy brass roundels, bound with metal of mercurial nature, at once solid and yet flowing. The doors swung open, seemingly of their own volition, to reveal a grand assembly room, the walls draped with tapestries that framed the focus of the room's aesthetics, a broad round table of polished oak, encompassed by chairs of chestnut and red leather. A figure on the far side of the room, who had been gazing out of the great bay windows, turned as I entered. It was the travelling Magi, the man I had come to know as Easy. "Hello again, Teller," he said, in that strong yet gentle voice I had come to know. "Welcome to the inner sanctum. Please, sit down. We have many things to discuss, you and I, if you are willing." It was a great pleasure to see him once again, and for a while we talked casually. He inquired of my health and my home, of my lady and her gardens, and then for the reason of my visit. I told him of my discovery, my ownership of the observer's timepiece, and other various artifacts, and of my plans to use them to solve the mystery of Atlantis. And all the while he nodded and smiled in that knowing manner of his. When I had completed my précis, He sat back, his finger steepled, and thought for a while. Everything you see here, the Sanctum, its grounds and gardens, corridors, halls, workshops, libraries and rooms, are yours to use as you will, he said. I was, I freely admit, quite astonished by his offer, and despite my darker, more mistrustful side immediately suspecting an ulterior motive, I thanked him, obviously. It was an exceedingly generous offer, and one that I would not have turned down without a good deal of sufficient cause. However, I always trust my intuition, and it was silently calling in that strident voice I have long since learned to hear and ignore at my peril. Not danger, no, but a secret, or not quite a truth, yes. He leaned forward then, and with a serious eye that was completely at odds with his previous demeanour, told me that his name was E.B. Shriver, that he was the owner of the magical emporium of the same name, the very same that had purchased the Observer's Hermitage all those years ago, and that he was about his own great work, namely that of preparing for a coming contention in which all magi and all mortals would be required to choose a side. He told me that it would be fought here on earth and in the heavens above, for both sides, the circle and the castle, have served their purpose, that being to keep us at war with each other whilst the hungering powers, beings of far lesser compassion than even that of the circle, have watched their plans grow to fruition and are almost ready to reap their harvest. For, he warned, had we magi all not heard the creak, the etheric sound of the last seal breaking, he asked me then if I would join him and those few other magi of like mind and enter into the contention, not choosing one of the sides that had been laid out for all, but rather to stand apart, to observe, to strategize, and to influence the outcome of this paradigm war, to bring the war to a conclusion that would be of benefit to humankind, that would benefit both the soul of man and the spirit of Gaia, the planet to which we are all etherically tethered. I saw him then for the first time as he truly is, a magi of very particular powers and of a very particular faith, and a deeply held commitment to the continued existence of humanity. I said, yes, I would be honoured, in fact. Excellent, replied Easy. In that case, consider yourself a magi of the inner sanctum. I nodded gratefully, somewhat surprised at the ease of this sudden transition. I have a matter that needs your attention, stated Easy. A matter of some urgency, in fact. How so? I inquired. My intuition was telling me something, so I knew this might be coming. What is it that you need? I asked. A simple matter of some lost property that needs to be found and returned, replied Easy. I thought you, being a demon hunter of some repute, you would have all the requisite skills to carry out said retrieval. I see, said I. Off-world to another realm, is it? No, not at all, said Easy. Cornwall, England. Land's End, in fact. You are familiar with that area, I believe? I am, yes. And what am I looking for, Easy? A pearl that shines by night, he replied softly. Anything else to go on? I asked. Land's End isn't much of a seaside resort. I doubt I'll find a pearl that shines in the night mentioned in the local tourist office. Look for the Fey Lord, Fraxis, replied Easy, where the sea meets the land. He has been a little upset of late, and causing the locals along the coastline a lot of problems. One town, Boscastle, has already been flooded, and the sea along the north coast has become unnavigable. He needs to be calmed if possible. Find out what ails him and help him if you can. He may be a useful ally in the days to come, and the opportunity to bring him to the cause is worth your attention. Ah, so not a demon hunt then, I replied. Easy shrugged. No, perhaps not. But who knows how these things unfold? One more thing, he said. Yes, I replied, as I stood and made to enter the mists, my destination already forming familiar in my mind and soon to be underfoot. Please, he said, call me Shriver. I nodded and stepped into the mists.